So when I first left the academy, when I first quit my professorship and tried my hand at business, I had various totally a priori beliefs about what would sell and what would not sell that turned out to be unbelievably false. I had a very, very utilitarian, bare bones conception of what people would buy and how much they would pay for what they would buy. So I basically thought, well, look, at the end of the day, people don't want frills, they don't want fluff. The more valuable a given thing is, and when I say valuable, I don't mean in some derivative, artificial sense of the word concocted by economists. I mean literally tangibly valuable. So the more valuable a thing is, the more it approximates in its value to air and water and food and other such necessities. The more valuable it is in that sense, the more people will pay, holding other factors constant. This actually turned out to be just unfathomably false. And and it's not that I did not have the requisite data at my disposal. I've had it at my disposal as long as I've been a professional. I would see people who would be given $100,000 to do nothing, and on the basis of a three-sentence incoherent research proposal, and then I would see people, myself usually, but then I would see people who wrote these gorgeous, brilliant, deeply thoughtful proposals, which would then be plagiarized or used by the people on the grant committee, receive nothing, nothing, just absolutely nothing. So, but I refused to see this data. I refused to model this data correctly. I refused to read the tea leaves correctly. So anyway, I was thinking a moment ago. Okay, well, so what's going on? So yesterday I was thinking about ways to make some real money, not this nonsense, you know, $15 an hour wage labor kind of money that I'm making now, working for other people. What I was thinking is, okay, how to make real money, and it has to be something that I believe in. It has to be something that I do naturally. It has to be something that I have actual expertise in. I mean, that's true. Okay, that part is by no means undermined by what I'm about to say. But I was trying to think, okay, so what's the principle here? Why is it that somebody who provides an incredibly necessary service like a plumber is not paid particularly well? And I mean, they're paid reasonably, but they're not paid particularly well, even after you take into account the relatively large number of plumbers. And then why is it that somebody like a public speaking coach is paid just so extravagantly well? And of course, one reason is that the kind of people who do public speaking, uh, first of all, they have a lot of money, and if a gig goes badly, then they'll lose a lot of money. So there's that. But I think there's another principle, and here it is. When you're dealing with things that actually have tangible value, when you're dealing with things that cannot possibly be categorized as flim flam or as fluff, when you're dealing with things like medicine, plumbing, clothes manufacturing, shelter provision, when you're dealing with things like that, because they're necessary, their actual values, their perceived values and their actual values are going to coalesce. But when you're dealing with something like, public speaking coach, wellness coach, um, personal assistant, um, let's see, what other kind of somewhat nebulous, not to say spurious, but potentially spurious, piano instructor. I mean, piano instructors are very necessary, but there's very little correlation between how good a piano instructor is and how much they charge. I mean, I was thinking of becoming a piano instructor a few years ago when I lived in the South, and I called up some people and I met with them and I performed a little bit, and it turns out that pieces that I could play blindfolded when I was a kid without any effort were ones that these people could barely pay, but they were charging $150 an hour. I was going to charge around 20 an hour. And so yes, I mean, piano instruction, music instruction is a very tangible service, but the difference between somebody who charges $30 an hour and somebody who charges $200 an hour is cannot be traced, cannot be correlated with that tangible core, that penumbra, that $120 differential has nothing to do with anything concrete. So what's the explanation here? Well, the explanation is that when you're dealing with things, to the extent that a given product or service has some kind of tangible value, that it has a practical value, then it has a definite value. And to the extent that something does not have a definite value, its value is elastic. Not exactly in the sense that in which economists use that word, but in the sense that there's no limit to how much it can fluctuate. So, and it's also so consider something like Tony Robbins. Now, he probably does provide legitimate services, okay, but it is also indisputably the case that much of what he does is fluff, okay. But see, it's precisely because you don't know where the legitimacy begins and you don't know where the fluff ends that he can charge $1,500 for a 20-minute consultation. And also, when a service does not have a well-defined practical value, when the service is not making work boots or fixing a leaky pipe, when it's not a service like that, then it becomes unclear what the service is, and people can project all kinds of significances, usually emotional significances, into the service, which it may or may not have, because then what ends up happening is that the service becomes more than an economic service. It becomes a kind of para-friendship, which is Trojan horsed as a strictly economic service. So, I was looking up, I was on YouTube, I was thinking, well, look, if you tell me to speak in front of 15,000 people, I can do it without feeling nervous, right? I mean, if you give me a topic and give me 20 seconds to prepare, I can do it. I know I stammer and stumble a lot when I make these podcasts, but that's because I'm actually trying to say things that are substantial. I'm trying, and I'd like to think that at moments I vaguely do that. Okay, but that's another matter. But, I'm a good public speaker. I mean, beyond good. It's just totally natural for me. And, I went on YouTube, and there was some lady who was not a good public speaker. She was very, very good looking. She was an Asian lady around 45 or so, very attractive, but and by no means dumb or insubstantial. And I'm not saying that her service was spurious. I'm sure that her service is, well, I'm not sure, but it's likely that her service has considerable value. But what she was charging, which was astronomical, was simply not consistent with her actual goods, with her actual wares, with the actual service she was providing. And so what's the explanation? Well, it's precisely because, okay, so what was she doing? Her service was this. It's a very good business model, and it's a business model that I'm going to adopt, but among others. In other words, it's one of several business models that I will adopt. But so what was her service? Well, her service was this. Executives who are good at doing whatever it is executives do, but who are not good at publicly speaking, will go to her, and she will, I don't know, tell them to meditate, or she'll somehow fix them psychologically so that they can speak in public. So I don't know whether she does that. She probably does to some degree. But in any case, that's her service. Okay. Now here's the thing, which is that these people they tell themselves that they're paying for one thing. Okay, they tell themselves that they're paying for some kind of practical service, but that's not really that's maybe in part what they're paying for, but they're probably paying for something else. And so when it's not really clear to the person who's doing the buying what it is that he's buying, and when there's an emotional component to it, okay, so especially when you're dealing with one-on-one relationships, as you are when you're dealing with a therapist or a paratherapist, like a life coach or a speech coach, well, in that case, there's really no limit to how much the price to how much the price can go up, to how high the price can be. And this potentially also, so if you're buying eggs or wheat, well, the price is the price. I mean, you'll pay the appropriate market rate for it, right? But let's suppose that you're buying let's suppose that you're buying a nicely bound book. Okay, so in that case, you're not just buying the content that is inside the book. I used to think that people were just buying the content, that they were actually buying the information inside the book. But no, you're buying a lot of things. Okay, one of which is the information inside the book, but you're buying a lot of other things, and it's precisely because you don't quite know what those things are, and it's also because, to the extent that you don't know what they are emotional things, things that strike unidentifiable chords within you. It's precisely for that reason. It's precisely because the product is of such limited utility, and it is precisely because the product is of such limited utility, and consequently that its market value is hewed not to its utility but to intangible emotional factors which can inflate it ad infinitum, ad libitum. Okay, so that is something I learned, and I think it's not entirely inconsequential principle of economics, and it's one that I'm going to actualize.